Hello, everyone. With the World Championship match coming up in November between Grandmaster Magnus Carlsen and Russian Grandmaster Sergey Karyakin, what I want to do is a series of videos showing some of the games between the champion and the challenger, but separately, of course. So, in this series, I'm going to show all of Magnus Carlsen's miniature games from the beginning of his career in about 2001 all the way up to 2015. And when I say miniature games, I'm talking about games under 30 moves. So, in other words, these are knockouts. Uh, so, and what's great about miniatures is you can learn some tactics real quick and learn about opening, as I've stated in other videos, and they're fun. They're like eating potato chips. They're great learning tools because in order for somebody to lose so quickly, there has to be an error in the game, and or a series of errors or bad moves. And then on the other hand, you get to see the implementation of the plan of the other side, so you know exactly what an opening should look like or what should be happening if everything goes your way. So enjoy this series. It's gonna be a lot of games, so I'm gonna be dividing them up. I'm not gonna do 3 hours worth of miniatures or whatever, but just little sections of videos. I hope you get a lot out of them. Subscribe to my channel. Support it. Any way you can. Um, just by like watching the videos and spreading the word. Also, um, we're gonna be doing first, just so you know how I'm gonna be doing this. Is first I'm gonna do Magnus Carlsen miniatures, just with him from the white side. So it's gonna be Magnus Carlsen with the white pieces in all the games, so I don't have to keep saying Magnus Carlsen with the white pieces, such and such with the black pieces. I'm starting off with Magnus knockouts from the with him with the white pieces, and then uh, I'll let you know when I do the black pieces with Magnus Carlsen. But first, uh, we're gonna start out with the white pieces. This game is probably 2001, I think, and Magnus was uh, not even rated at the time. He might have been a 2000 level player, 2100 player. So what's great about these games too is you'll be able to see the evolution of his style and his growth as a player, and you get to see what type of player uh, he was. Because once these players get to these elite levels, uh, I mean their style is much different from when they first start out. Stuff, they're more enterprising and more experimental. They're trying to find themselves when they first start playing, and by the time they become professional, they hit their stride. They have a certain repertoire. They don't take as much risk, etc., etc. And also, the top level opponents don't let them get away with as much as they normally would. So there's certain players that we think are like drawish type players. Like people always make fun of Anish Giri. Oh, he's always drawing, or like a Peter Lako or something like that. And the reason why they draw a lot is because it's very tough to win at those levels. If those guys played, say, with just 2,500 players, 2,600 players and below, you would see some spectacular games and quick finishes and knockouts because those players would allow those opportunities to arise in those games. But anyway, enough talking. Like I said, so first we're gonna hit Magnus Carlsen, then we'll hit some Sergey Karyakin games. So this game is between Carlsen and a player named G. Fent. The game started out e4 for Magnus, e6, French defense, d4, d5, knight c3, bishop b4, Venava variation, e5. Just again for my novice players, don't want to leave you out. This bishop is pinning this knight on c3. So therefore this pawn on e4 is no longer protected. So black has the threat of just capturing this pawn. And this is why Magnus pushed in the game. So e5, knight e7. Part of the plus of e5 is that it takes away room from black's pieces. So black has to develop his knight on e7 instead of the ideal square of knight f6. a3, just challenging the bishop. Bishop takes c3, b takes c3. Now notice that with the absence of black's dark square bishop, he has no guardian of the dark squares, especially around the king. So he must be very careful. We see white with the two bishops and space on the king side. So ideally he would love to put the light square bishop on d3, knight f3, and conduct a king side attack. Black, on the other hand, would like to play the move c5 and exploit these weaknesses on the queen side, and there he will find his counterplay. But the attack on the king is of utmost importance, and black has to maintain security for his king while conducting counterplay on the queen side. b6, trying to find employment for this bishop who is blocked. It's one of the downsides of the French, is trying to find employment for that bishop. So the bishop can come to a6 or b7. Queen g4, just highlighting the absence of the dark square bishop that was just traded off. Knight f5, protecting this pawn. And just note real quick that sometimes this pawn on g7 is just giving up in the gambit. Bishop d3, just threatening to snatch the knight off and then win the pawn. h5, c5, bishop takes f5, e takes f5, and the queen comes back to harassing this pawn on g7. King f8, h4 for Magnus. Note this square is weak. And remember, I keep reiterating what I said about the dark squares. Knight c6, bishop g5, harassing the queen. f6, e takes f6, g takes f6, bishop e3. So we see black is holding on here, but his pawn structure is really bad. His his king is looking a little exposed on f8, and so we have to say white is a little bit better here. But white's king is in the middle also, and his pawns are jacked up too on the queen side. So that's why I say white has a smaller, it has an advantage, but it's not a huge advantage at this point. Okay, so queen e7, knight e2, bishop e6, castle. And now Magnus seems to have consolidated his position a little bit better than black has. His king is now tucked away safely, although black would like to play here with the rook, putting pressure down here. White's position just seems a little bit more sound to me right now. So king f7, wanting to bring the pieces over. Knight f4, Rook a g8, Queen f3, just highlighting the pawn weakness that black has. Notice that pawns on h5 and d5 are ready to be captured. Queen d7, Rook a d1. Magnus doesn't go after this pawn, he just brings his last piece into the game. Black just tries to keep the position closed as possible since his king is exposed over there. Magnus brings the rook to the open file. Rook g4. Magnus plays g3. King f8. If you want, you can pause the video here. Magnus was able to deliver a crushing blow here. If you want to pause the video, do it now. Okay, I've been preaching about the dark square weakness, right, the whole game. So it's only fitting that the combination is possible because of black's weakness on the dark squares. So with black's last move, king f8, he goes to a dark square, and we have the dark square bishop here, which happens to be white's worst piece. We have this knight, this bishop here, which is now only protected by the queen. So knight f4 is attacking that piece. So now you can see this rook on e1 also putting pressure on the bishop on e6. So this is the crux of the combination. So Magnus played knight takes e6, and it's check. And after queen takes e6, we can see the queen is lined up with the rook on e1. And now, just to discover check, bishop takes h6, king f7, rook takes e6, king takes e6, bishop f4. Black could have resigned, but he didn't. Knight e7, rook e1 check, king d7, doubling up on the file. And then black resigned. Alright, our next miniature comes from a black player named Johansson, Magnus Carlsen on the white side. Alright, so e4, g6, modern defense, d4, bishop g7, knight c3, d6. For those that are interested, Magnus Carlsen was about 2200 at this juncture. So he was just in the process of being a master player. d6, f4. This is a modern defense, and white has a so-called like Austrian attack setup, which is real aggressive and basically designed to blow black off the board with this space advantage here. c5, threatening to win a pawn, counteracting in the center. D takes c5, queen a5 check, now usually this is more effective in the Pyrrhics when this knight is already on f6, because then when the queen comes to a5, this pawn is actually threatened with capture. And this is why after d takes c5, after queen a5, This pawn is not in danger, and Magnus can just simply take. So the line doesn't uh, work here. So c takes d6, bishop takes c3, b takes c3, and if you're asking the question, what is black doing, then that means you're becoming a stronger chess player, because black is just playing utterly ridiculous. So he makes fianchetto over here and then gives up the strong bishop and leaves the dark squares weak again. Okay, so queen takes c3, bishop d2. So he goes pawn grabbing with the queen, and you already see several queen moves already, and no development from black. So bishop d3, and notice Magnus is developing and maintaining a strong center. So the position does look kind of weird at first until you just look at the center of the board, and you'll see that Magnus has a quite classical center here. Just forget about this pawn up here for a second and just look at the rest of the white's position. This knight will come here, eventually be able to castle. So bishop d3, queen takes d6, more pawn grabbing. That's the, in case you weren't counting, that's the third queen move. Nothing else is being developed. And you probably could suspect that black is in all kind of trouble here. Bishop c3 with a threat against the rook on h8. f6, blocking that threat. Natural move, knight f6, leads to trouble after bishop b5, check, bishop d7, and then queen takes d6. And then once this pawn is deflected, then this guy's unprotected. And that's how that would go. So this is why f6 was played. Knight f3, knight c6, now Magnus drops back to protect the f pawn. Although he probably could have just given that pawn up, played a move like bishop c4, and get out on this long diagonal and just given this pawn up. Black is so far behind in development that he can't really afford to do that. Again, there's another queen move. You probably haven't seen a game with this many queen moves. So queen c5, and it only has one purpose, and that's to keep white from castling. Queen e2, and the idea is to play that. Knight h6, h3, keeping pieces from here, from this square. Black castles, and bishop e3 is played. Check. Does it win the rook on a1? Nope, because the king connects the rooks. Knight f7, rook hd1, e5, bishop c4. Magnus finds the diagonal with the bishop, and notice how he takes the diagonal away from black's bishop. Black's bishop will love to be there too. Another queen move, queen a5. You probably lost count. King g1, king g7, rook a b1, Queen c7, bishop c5, attacking the rook, rook e8, bishop takes f7, queen takes f7, f takes e5, f takes e5, knight g5, another queen move, pawn grabbing, queen f2. And I just want to mention that that Magnus, of course, did make some errors. He was only probably about 2200 at this time, but he still is winning the game, although he made some inaccuracies, many of them actually. Just guarding this square, just trying to keep the queen out. The problem is these pieces on the back rank. This king needs help. After rook f1, now you have the king and queen lined up. There's no way to stop the penetration into the king position. So queen a6, bishop e7. Of course, if rook takes, then the queen comes back here. Bishop e6. Magnus finds queen f6, but bishop f8 check will get the job done after king g8 and queen f6. But back to the game, queen f6, king g8, and then Magnus played it, threatening mate, and black goes berserk and takes rook on f1, rook takes f1, and then he resigned. Alright, our next knockout from Magnus Carlsen was against a player named Jensen Becker. And again, Magnus is around 2200 at the time this game was played. Okay, so e4, c5, knight f3, d6, knight c3. We have a Sicilian in effect. C takes d4, knight takes d4, knight takes d4. So we see a little dubious exchange that's giving white the center for no reason early in the game. And the black player was about 2200 too at the time, just so you know. So a6, and let it just be said that white already has a tremendous advantage because black is just giving them complete control of the center for no reason. Alright, so a6, bishop g5, and Magnus just simply wants to blow black off the board. He wants the castle queen side. Okay, queen comes out, and usually seeing the queen this early is not that good, but he does appear with the threat on the board. But unfortunately for black, this threat like this is easily parried. I mean, white could just play bishop d2, still be developed, and in the future gain time on the queen. Instead, Magnus plays f4, holding his ground. So this is good too. f4 is a move that is commonly useful in the Sicilian, so white really wastes no time at all. So it's an acceptable move also. There's e5 and queen d2. Note again the development situation. Black is not developing at all. It's just pushing pawns and moving queens. Now, the Sicilian defense is what is called a semi-closed position. So which means that it's almost a closed position. So therefore, usually black can get away with wasting a little more time than, say, like if you were playing an open game, like the Joko Piano or something like that. Some of the King Pawn games. And that's usually one of the advantages of the closed games is that you can get away with a lot of maneuvering and more time wasting, so to speak, because the position is closed and it's harder to exploit. Um, the lack of loss of time in those positions, and the Caesarean is like that. But you still have to be careful and not waste too much time. So there's another pawn move, and as soon as I see stuff like that, see the light squares just becoming really weak. Look at that. Looks like a Minecraft sword or something like that. It's okay. So f6. Bishop just drops back. Bishop e6. f5. Bishop f2. So we see here that Magnus has not really exploited his advantage in the most efficient way either. He's wasted a little time and giving black a chance to consolidate his position somewhat. So knight e7, b4. So a wild outburst here by Magnus, showing his aggressive intentions. Queen c7, b5. Magnus is presuming that the opponent wants to castle this way. He just wants to open up the position while there's this little log jam over here. So knight c8, and actually here g6 was probably better. g6, you got to get this guy out, right? You got to get this dark square bishop out and start counterattacking. Just play g6. Alright, so after b5, knight c8, rook b1, bishop e7, b takes a6, b takes a6, knight d5, queen to c6, c4, and now we see Magnus starting to dominate the position. Castles, bishop d3, bishop d8, castle, bishop takes d5, it's unnecessary, c takes d5, queen a4, the rook goes to the 7th, and for some reason black was in a charitable mood and just dropped a piece. So rook takes a7, bishop a5, then he resigned. So black basically just blundered when he did that. He could have played knight e7, but he still busted anyway. After, say for instance, this rook c1. Black's position is somewhat solid, but it's just he has no prospects in the position, and he's basically gonna just wait for white just to penetrate his position and destroy him. So he played this move, and he probably forgot about this guy tucked away here. And then so he resigned. So that's the third knockout for Magnus. Okay, our next fight was between Magnus Carlsen with the white pieces and a player named P Man with the black pieces. Okay, So Magnus started out with knight f3 this time. If you notice the other games, he started with e4. So we see that this game, 2002, he starts switching to queen pawn openings. Knight f3, knight f6, g3, d5, bishop g2, e6, castle. So we have like a reverse King's Indian attack, or King's Indian type system as white in reverse. We don't know what it's going to be yet because the D pawn or C pawn has not been committed yet. So bishop e7, c4. Okay, so now we have like a English castles. d4, solid enough. Okay, so we have some type of closed Catalan system now. Alright, c6, queen c2. Right, nice quiet looking game. It doesn't look like this game could be a miniature at all. We're already at move 7. Game is pretty equal. Knight bd7, b3. So now, it looks like a ready system, and it's definitely quiet. Can hear the crickets. Alright, b3, b6. Okay, gotta take care of the problem bishop, right? Either bring it to a6 or b7. Bishop b2, bishop b7. Knight bd2. Rook c8, great move. Lining up against the opponent's king, taking that long distance opposition, and at the same time preparing to move c5. There's e4, and there's a timely strike at the center, which black must have ready to counteract white's large and powerful center. So e takes d5, e takes d5, queen f5, d takes c4, knight takes c4. And great game by black so far. It completely neutralized white's center here, and it's a good game. Bishop e4, queen h3, rook e8, rook a d1, queen c7, d takes c5, bishop takes c5, and black has achieved all of his goals here. He's neutralized that center that used to be on these squares from white, and he has all his pieces developed. So this is a model game from black here. So knight d4, bishop takes g2, queen takes g2, bishop takes d4, bishop takes d4, and rook e2. The idea is black is feeling good. It's on a second rank, attacking pawns. Magnus plays a4. Black offers a trade of queens. Queen takes c6, rook takes c6, knight e3 plays Magnus. So now we see a little danger around this rook right here, and as some squares have been cut off, namely the retreat squares have been cut off by the knight, so the rook has to be very careful in this spot. Also notice too the back rank of black, so just keep that in mind. Maybe a good move here is h6 or h5 if you're black. Black played a6 and fell asleep. You can pause the video now and find Magnus Carlsen's move in this spot. Alright. Remember, I gave you that hint. I just mentioned the back rank. Magnus played. Bishop takes f6. And we see this guy is unprotected. If he captures, this rook goes back and checkmates the king. Just so you can actually see it. Knight takes f6. Rook d8 check. Knight e8. And rook takes e8 would be checkmate. And this is why black resigned. There is no proper defense. If rook takes f6, then rook takes d7. And white is just up a knight. Same applies if g takes f6. White is up a knight. And we've shown already that knight takes f6 is inadequate. So black resigned. Okay, next up with the black pieces, a player named Torsten Mader. Okay, Magnus starts out with e4, e6, French defense, d4, d5, bishop e2. Kind of a unorthodox defense move by white. Normal is just simply knight c3, right, which is the classical variation, or e5, the advanced variation. But bishop d3 packs some venom. D takes e4, the most logical continuation. Bishop takes e4 and then gaining time with knight f6. So we can say that black has equalized already. But sometimes players just want to take the game into uncharted territory or avoid theory that they may not be prepared for. Perhaps at this time Carlsen might have felt that he's not prepared to fight in the French defense and wanted to create a position that was merely playable with no particular advantage. So the bishop goes to f3, c6, and we already see that the black player is affected somewhat because he plays this move c6 in order to blunt the power of this bishop on the diagonal, when everybody and his mother knows, those who've been playing chess for 5 minutes, that c5 is essential in the French. And also you notice the structure too is like the Queen's Gambit decline structure, and same in the Caro-Kann, that c5 is a necessity to break down the center and destroy white center. So c5 is definitely something that should have been considered. So after c6, again, neither side has lost the game, but it shows that Carlsen's opening has definitely had a psychological effect on his opponent, because now he basically he shows that he flinched and that he's going to play Carlsen's game here. Okay, knight e2, bishop d6, knight b c3, castle, bishop g5, knight b d7, queen d2. Carlsen showing very aggressive intentions. Queen a5. There it is. So white has full development and is basically ready to start attacking. And black is a little cramped, but has a very solid position. And that's a common theme with these structures, these Yaroslav structures, especially where the D pawn is missing, because white loses his influence. That would be on the e4 and c4 squares, and therefore white enjoys more space and mobility, which he will try to use to turn into an attack on the king or gain some type of other concession, whether it be material or more space or what have you. Black's job is to try to obtain either the e5 break or c5 break, which is normally a little easier to obtain, and to liberate his position. He has his bad bishop on c8, which in turn is locking the bishop. In turn locking the rook in on the a8, and so he has some work to do. He's solid, but it's very cramped, and if he doesn't do something quick, he can quickly be overrun. So knight d5. When you're cramped, good thing to do is to try to exchange some pieces. King b1, bishop b4, bishop takes d5, e takes d5. Maybe c takes d5 might have been a little better. And then perhaps if you could get that bishop on c8 out the way, you could bring the rook over to the file. But I don't think it's that much of a difference. E takes d5, a3, bishop d6, knight g3, knight b6. So black is doing pretty good here. He's figured it out. He's traded a couple of pieces, and he has some counterplay going. But just like that, Magnus plays bishop f6, which is a very provocative move here. I mean, there's all kind of stuff going on here. I mean, threat queen g6, queen g5, and then mate. The idea is a knight coming here. But the first question you might ask is, well, why can't he just take? Alright, so if he takes, right, he didn't take game, but if he does take, then he's lost because the knight comes here, right? And the main idea, let me just make like a null move just to show you the main idea. Let's say bishop g4, right? And he attacks the knight. Well, knight f6 check, king g7, queen g5 check, king h8, threaten mate, forget about the piece, bishop f5, again threatening mate, forget about the piece, and let's say he tries to stop the mate with rook g8, then you just play that, and it's over. So bishop f6 is very, very provocative move. And that probably shocked the pants off of the black player. So he played a natural looking move, is he brought his knight back to attack the bishop, and that helped defend the king. Now hindsight, h6 may have just been the move. In other words, just preventing the queen from going here. But it's a difficult position to be in. So after knight d7, you could pause the video and wonder, well, what did Magnus do here? Did Magnus play queen g5? Did he play knight h4? F4. Or did he play something else? So if you want, you could pause that video and try to work it out. No engines. Just try to work it out over the board. Set your chessboard up. All right. So Magnus played bishop takes g7. And after king takes g7, knight f5 check. Right, with the fork. So if you saw the fork earlier, then the combination was easy to. The bishop takes g7 is easy to find. Once you see the fork thing, right? Then once you see that fork thing, and the idea is to see it before you actually make the move, right? I'm just doing it over so you can get a good look, so you can visualize what it looks like in your head. Bishop takes g7, king comes up, and boom. And notice, the key thing to notice is always mark out the unprotected pieces in position mentally. So that's part one. And the other part is bring the other pieces in. Right, he goes there. Think Magnus went after this bishop? Of course not. Went after the king. Rook g8. Now what? Knight takes d6. Takes a piece and threatens the epaulette mate right there. And the king right in the corner. So now black is stuck defending that. So he attacks the queen. Check. King g8. Now what? The rook is threatening the queen. King is threatening the knight. Just queen f4, protecting everything, and just leaving the king exposed. Rook f6 is nothing to worry about because there's too many checks available. Knight h6, king g7, queen g5 check, rook g6, knight f5, queen e7, and it's just super difficult for black to do anything because he can't move the knight, the queen can't come back. So basically this rook is all by itself trying to defend the king. Queen c7, rook d e1, another piece coming into the game. Queen d8 check, rook g8, attacking the queen. Right, this is attacked. So now what? Black has got to be coming back now, but nope. Look at that. Queen and rook threatening the threatener. And there, black resigned. There's nothing left after rook takes e8, just queen takes e8 check. And this is what happens, my friends, when you have bad pieces. No development whatsoever. So that's another Magnus Carlsen knockout. We're going to do one more knockout. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, our next player was the black pieces, Fritz Bendrich. At this time, I believe this is still about 2002. Magnus is steadily going up in the ratings. Magnus is about around 2,300, I believe, at the time. You could look that up when he played Fritz Bendrich. I think Bendrich was about 2,300, maybe a little less than Carlsen, but they're about the similar ratings. Alright, so this game started off the e4 from Carlsen. c5, Knight c3. Is this an invitation to a closed Sicilian? We will see. d6. f4. This is the so-called Grand Prix attack, which is popular amongst British grandmasters. About 20 years ago. Knight c6. And this line is a pretty classic game. It's between, you can look it up when you get a chance, between Viswanathan Anand and with the white pieces, and Boris Gelfand with the black pieces in the Grand Prix attack in this line. So check that out if you're interested in the white side. This line, pretty nice game. Okay, knight c6, knight f3 from Carlsen, g6, bishop b5. Now, not to get too much into the theory, because like I said, we're just going through miniatures. These are just quick knockouts. But usually, I know that that black does not like to allow. It's not good for black to allow this knight to be traded off by this bishop. Usually, the black avoids this trade. Sometimes this knight ends up here, or somehow this bishop is prevented from trading itself for that knight. But I would do a little more research on that if I were interested. But I know that usually that's a bad sign for black if he allows this bishop to trade itself for that knight. So bishop g7, castle, a6, bishop takes c6 check, there it is, b takes c6, queen e2, and white's plan is real simple, just storm the king side. And that's why this knight is so important, because usually this knight can hop into d4 supported by this bishop and just be a nuisance over here on these squares. And that's why this light square bishop that white traded for it, even though it's important, that knight is more important. So e6, e5. Notice how white is shutting down a position. So again, so this bishop is bad. If he captures, and you got these two pawns that are weak, pushing keeps the position closed. The position becomes more conducive to the knights than to the bishops. And that's what black does. d5, and this gives white a big advantage, because these two bishops are both bad now. So this is a position conducive to the knights. Why do I say that? Because the knights have outposts. Here's one, here's another one, and here's another one. Okay, so b3 was played. And this bishop has to get involved. If you notice, white is blocked the way of this bishop to come out traditionally by these two pawns. So the logical place for the bishop is probably on a3, where he can attack this pawn and have some participation in the game, and thereby these rooks are connected. Knight h6. Excuse me. Eyeing those two squares right there. And like I said, the bishop comes to probably its best square. Bishop f8. Knight a4. And it's funny, you see this exact same idea in reverse in the Nimzo Indian defense, and some variations where uh, there's double pawns on the C file, and you'll see black playing the move b6 followed by knight a5 and bishop a6 to attack white's double pawns, namely the pawn on c4 in the same manner as you see, but just in reverse. So pressure on this pawn, queen a5, d3, rook b8, c4, and this just fixes black's weakness permanently. These bishops will be horrible, and white will just conduct his attack. So knight f4, and white offers a trade of queens, feeling that he has a superior end game. Rook b4, strange move to give up the exchange. Carlsen just takes it. C takes b4, C takes d5, E takes d5. More weakness now shows up on the board. Now this is attacked 3 times. And notice the pressure that Carlsen just keeps putting on it. Okay, so now this pawn is protected, but now it's backward. So he's trading robbing Peter to pay Paul, basically. So he protects the pawn on c5, creates an outpost for his knight to go to e3, but he creates a eternal weakness at the same time. Knight d2, of course. Bishop b7, and of course knight c4. Have to keep an eye on these squares. Queen c7, rook fe1, and black either resigned or lost on time. It does not say, but black is busted, just totally busted in his position. So I'm not sure if he resigned or maybe he just lost in a difficult position. But here black is just totally busted. For instance, let's see if we can. Okay, so knight e3 is not happening because this knight is covering that square and this rook is covering that square. So let's just make I don't know, like some kind of normal looking move. It's hard to find a move here, but let's say, like, for instance, I don't know, let's say bishop e7. See, then just simple move like knight d6 would happen. Knight d6 check, knight d6, rook takes c5. Just all kind of brutality would take place. So that's why I'm not sure if white resigned or black resigned or what, but he's totally busted in his position. Alright, I decided to do one more. This last brutality comes from 2002 World Youth Championships, which was held in Greece in the under 12 years old section. And both of these guys are now grandmasters. With the white pieces, Magnus Carlsen, and he was rated 2250 at the time, and he was playing Yuri Kozubov, who was rated 2186, and was now a grandmaster. The game started off d4 from Carlsen. I said Carlsen. Carlsen. d4, knight f6, bishop g5. Again, you hardly ever see these openings at the top levels, so it's fun to see them. This is the so-called Trompovsky attack. And if you're interested in this opening, the man to look at his games is Julian Hodgson, the British grandmaster, who's inactive now, but back in the 90s, man, he was beating a lot of GMs with this stuff. Okay, d5, which is a normal response. c5 can be played. There's a lot of different responses. Knight e4 can be played. Knight e4, I remember all these crazy lines. Knight e4, bishop f4, knight e4, h4. There's a lot of crazy stuff here. Like I said, c5 is played. e6. I mean, you could play just about anything. I even seen this played g6. So d5 is respectable. Bishop takes f6. G takes f6. So we know that bishop takes f6 can't really give white any advantage. It's just, again, avoiding major theory that might occur in the Queen's Gambit. And Magnus, you can see, even at this young age, is into reaching positions sometimes that are just merely playable. You know, he has a perfect pawn structure, and he wishes to outplay his opponent. What does black have in order to equalize here? Well, his two bishops, and he has a pawn preponderance in the center, which is great. And he has this open file for his rook. So black, his job is to utilize his positive features, and white is basically looking to gradually exchange and neutralize white's bishop here and its excess of pawns in the center, and exploit the pawn weakness in an ending. So the game continued. Knight c3, e6, knight f3, just normal development from Magnus. c5, e4, and Magnus just wants to create more pawn weakness. So if Magnus was able to move again, he would love to play e takes d4, and after e takes d4, you see those pawns on the f file looking crazy. So c takes d4 was taken. Knight takes d4. Now here Magnus missed a nice opportunity here. Just bishop b5 check, and say bishop d7, bishop d7, knight takes d7, queen takes, d takes, queen takes. And white has achieved one of the goals that I was talking about, and that was neutralizing the bishop pair. In this case, he's forced white to get rid of it, and we can see attack here, He has a lead in development, and black is saddled with weak pawns, but without the bishop pair to compensate. So back to the game. Knight takes d4, d takes e4. Now he plays bishop b5 check, bishop d7, queen h5. There's some real grimy skullduggery going on here with this bishop pinned to the king right here. Again, if Magnus could move again, he would be playing knight takes e6 because there's a pin. So for instance, this knight will be able to take here because this bishop is pinned and this pawn is also pinned. So this knight would come crashing in. So that's the threat that we're dealing with here. So queen b6, putting more pressure on the bishop and adding some defense to the e6 square. Castle. And now we see that white has a tremendous lead in development, and black really hasn't gotten started yet in the game, where he just has these two pieces off the back rank. So queen c5, move looks suspicious, and if you've been following my videos long enough, the reason why it looks suspicious is because black has no development. He has the bishop on d7, which is pinned. That's all he can call for development. But yet somehow I'm supposed to believe and respect that he has time to move the queen to b6 and then c5, and then that's supposed to be okay. Well, my chess instincts tell me there has to be some kind of penalty for that kind of idea, right? And that's how your mind should work too. Like, you see moves like that, you look at this position, you be like, what? He has time to move the queen 2 times. That can't be right with all of these pieces undeveloped like this. So of course Magnus just plays knight takes e4. He's like, wait a minute. The queen is hanging. How can he play knight takes e4? Because you're figuring, after knight takes e4, this queen takes and just be up a queen. Nope, Magnus has seen a little bit further. Remember, we were talking about pawn weakness earlier, right? So the queen takes h5, knight takes f6, and there we go, a fork. Right now everybody can see the fork right from this position. Like if I said pause the video here, white to move, everybody could see the fork, right? The idea and what you want to master is, after this move, you want to see the fork from here. If you can see the fork from here, then you know that you got knight takes e4. And that's what Magnus saw. Magnus sees a possibility. He's looking at this square, that, and that, and he puts it all together. Boom, boom, boom. Knight takes f6, check. King comes up. Knight takes h5. But you might say, well, okay, material is still even. And then I'll say, no, it isn't, because white has one pawn, and that's all he needs to win the game. So knight c6, bishop takes c6, bishop takes c6. White brings his last piece into the game. There's all kind of funny stuff with knight here check, since there's the pin of the e6 pawn. But again, you can always just eliminate the bishop here. And after rook he1, black had enough. He was just down a pawn, and so let's say, for instance, I don't know. Let's hard to find moves for white. Let's matter of fact, let's say black played check, right? Okay, so f4, and say if a move like rook hg8, boom, fork. I can't do that. So let's say he went back. Can you see the mate? Check. Now look at the coverage. That's all covered. This square is covered. He can't come out. And now you see why white forced black to resign. For instance, if again another null move rook c8, there's no way to effectively stop this mating threat here. And that's really what's going on there, is that it's either mate or allow the loss of material. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed those Magnus knockouts from the white side. We're going to continue because we're still early in Magnus's career, so we continuing. Right now we're in 2002, so we have like 14 years to go. So we're gonna probably do another segment tomorrow, and and give the people what they've been looking for. So we're gonna do some Magnus games, more Magnus games with the white pieces. Then we'll switch to the black pieces, and we're doing all miniatures. And then we'll go to Sergey Karyakin. All right. So hope you enjoy that. Again, subscribe to the channel. Leave comments. Chess related comments, of course. We're just trying to do our best. Have some fun stuff, and enjoy each other on the internet. So talk to you guys later, and good luck in your chess games.